Hello. Hello, welcome everyone who's joining.
Hi everyone, good to see you all. Thanks so much for being here.
Welcome to the fourth session in Realliance's Designing Regenerative Change webinar series. And in this series, we guide you through what might be some of the various stages of your own design process if you're designing a regenerative initiative. So we've already looked at visioning the possibilities, mapping the resources, turning that into a design for action. And today we're going to take you through another step. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Exactly. My name's James and this is Jackie. We're from the Realliance team. So today is all about thinking about implementation. So now that we have visioned possibilities for our work and we've mapped out all the resources and what we'll need, we've been designing.
Yeah, putting it all together in one cohesive plan.
Exactly, the designing for action. And now we're thinking, what are the implementation plans? What needs to happen that we can get this project rolling? Mm-hmm. And of course, we always want to do this from the lens of regeneration, being inspired by nature's living principles, by how nature works. Mm. So not just coming up with a step-by-step plan, or not just copying another person's implementation plan, but really embedding regeneration in the process of how we do this as well.
Exactly. And I feel like when we often speak to contacts and connections that we have, regeneration and regenerative thinking and design seems like it's thought of as a luxury that you do if you have the time, and it's kind of a bit more theoretical. But in this session, we'll think a bit more about how this can feed in, even in the action stage, not just the planning, thinking stage, but in the real kind of practical work as well.
Exactly. And I also think that often when we think of regenerative projects, I think the dominant thought of what a permaculture project might be is that, it's very organic, it's always, changing and moving, which I think, permaculture projects and regenerative projects often do have an element of being adaptable and changing with the times and the context. But I also think that there is need often for a very kind of set plan and to actually think about implementation in a kind of structured way as well, to allowing as well for the uniquenesses of the place and the kind of uniquenesses of the people you're working with, and also being inspired by living systems as well.
Exactly. So as with every other session in this series, we speak a little bit about the regenerative principles that could inform your decisions at each stage of the process. And we like to contextualize these discussions with some real-world examples from Realliance members. So without much more speaking from us, I'd love to introduce you to today's presenter. Noah Ssempijja from YICE Uganda is going to tell us a little bit about his work and how regenerative design is incorporated into their implementation. So welcome, Noah.
Great to see you, Noah.
Hello, James and Jackie. Nice meeting you, and I'm excited about the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Noah. It's really great to have you here. And we were wondering, could you give us an example of a time when you have implemented a permaculture or regenerative project? Was there anything special that you needed to think about while implementing the project, and how did the process go for you?
Yeah, thank you so much, James. Thank you, Jackie. This is quite exciting. And, I think I'll give an example from our most recent work. When YICE received a grant from one of our partners, Regenerative, to start implementing regenerative farming activities for the refugees in Nakivale Refugee Settlement. At first, everything sounded like it would be easier. We'd just go into the settlement, put farmers together, and then start working. But actually, this wasn't the case, unfortunately. And we realized that we had to deal with a number of issues that actually required a lot of planning and very clear. We had to develop very clear implementation plans to be able to achieve this. For example, when we entered the settlement, we realized that the soils were far much more dry than we had anticipated, and basically no crop would grow on the soil, and but also we also realized that there were a number of other stakeholders working in the refugee settlement, working with the refugees, implementing a number of other, projects, like right from livelihood, health, education. At the same time, we had to deal with, having to engage the policymakers themselves, because I remembered we were actually allowed to enter into the refugee settlement until we had to sign an MOU with the government of Uganda, and also have to present the work that we are going to do with the UNHCR, the UN organization that is in charge of refugee protection across the world. So it was quite more complex than we had anticipated it would be. And this required a lot of planning that we had to do. And one of the things that we had to think about is what would be the right approach for us to get to implementing, the activities, the regenerative activities that we wanted to work on. And the entire view that we had before we got into the settlement around implementation changed completely, and it called for flexibility to sit back, replan everything, see how are we going to work on ourselves, how are we going to mobilize the communities. Remember, actually, the communities we are working with are also complex. We have refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have refugees from Rwanda, we have refugees from Burundi, and then we have some from Somalia and some from South Sudan. And all those refugees speak different languages, and they have different priorities. For example, some, their main focus is to get what to eat tomorrow, others to take the children to school, others to learn English to be able to fit into the communities. And we had to really employ a number of, strategies to get to plan our implementation and to implement the project successfully.
Thank you for sharing, Noah. It sounds very challenging. There are always challenges involved between getting the plan from paper into reality. And I know you're faced with a lot of challenges in that context you're working in Nakivale. And it can often be very difficult having to rethink your plan and alter what you're doing. So could you tell us a little bit more about that and the challenges you face and how you've overcome them?
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting that we really had to think hard to try to fit, to create, to implement the project and be successful. And of course, for us to be able to do this, we employed or we leveraged a number of tools. The first one that we looked at was the self-assessment tool. As an organization, we had to sit back and say, okay, fine. Are we really ready as an organization to implement this project in this kind of context? Of course, we had prior conversations with the donor and the communities, and everything was going really very, very fast. Normally, when we go to the communities, they will say, yeah, there is the need, and we want you to come and intervene. But there are a lot of details that you don't know until you really set foot into the community and you get serious with implementation. So we sat back and said, okay, here are a list of the challenges, a list of things we have to deal with. Are we having the capacity to be able to approach this? And if we do have, then what are the key actions that we should take? And from the self-assessment tool, we actually learned that, one of the things we actually lacked was that our team could not speak all the languages of the people that we are going to target, for example. And so the action was that, you know what, we now have to employ refugees from within the community who actually understand the cultures, the behaviors, and most importantly, the language to carry on the trainings. And that now meant that we had to change the entire, go into the community, start mobilizing, start training. Now we had to go back to go into the community, hire the local trainers, offer them refreshed training of trainers courses in regenerative farming and permaculture, and then prepare them to actually conduct the trainings. The interesting thing is most of these guys, most of the staff that we hired, the staff we had were refugees themselves, but they had never worked into a formal setting, And so we had to go way beyond to training, way beyond training on how to deliver regenerative farming activities, but also training them on how to communicate. If there is a donor coming, how do you speak to the donor? There is a partner, how do you speak to the partner? How do you, engage with conflicts in the community? How do you resolve the conflicts? So that's one thing that we got out of the self-assessment tool. Then the next thing was the team planning and reflection. When we put together a team, including those that had refugees, the next tool we employed was how do we plan the tool and how do we reflect on understanding the weaknesses and the strength of the different team members that we had. Of course, you'd imagine that one of the things we observed when we were in the community that female participants felt more confident and, they felt confident working with the female trainers. But at the same time, there are groups, for example, for the nationals that we were targeting that felt more confident working with male trainers because, I don't know, for cultural reasons, they thought the males were strong, they were agile, they would do whatever that, they would do the trainings very well. But some of the female participants felt like they wanted to. So we had to now reorganize and have, okay, for the groups we've mobilized that have more female participants, we shall have female trainers. Those that have both national refugees, we shall have male trainers. And then how do we then do other activities away from training? How do we monitor the trainings? How do we go back to support the farmers? So the team planning and reflection tool helped us to put together, ask us ourselves all these questions and get answers to them, and also be able to engage, be able to effectively implement the plans that we have put in place. Then the other interesting tool, which I should have started with, was the stakeholder mapping and engagement tool. Because we're in this ecosystem where we have over 70 organizations operating, delivering different services. You have the government, you have UN organizations, both international and national organizations, refugee-led organizations as well. So we had to sit down and map out who are these organizations in this space, what are they doing, and how does whatever they are doing link into what we are going to do or what we are doing. For example, we identified, I could give you an example of an organization called Nsamizi Technical Institute. And they are the ones who are into environmental trainings, teaching refugees the importance of planting trees and helping them to plant trees. So we identified they were doing a great job. And when we mapped them, we reached out to them and asked them, look, we are here to implement regenerative farming activities, but we want your program, we want to integrate your program of tree planting into what we are doing so that we can, and we are excited because at first their approach was to go to the community, give trees to anyone in the community. And then for us, we told them, no, our approach is to give trees to the individuals, individual households. And you know what? They gave us the trees and we monitored the activities together. And they are surprised that our approach is actually working, and actually they are borrowing our approach moving forward. But also the most interesting bit of it is that even when we don't have the donor funds, Nsamizi continues supporting the households that we worked with. So stakeholder mapping helped us to understand who were the stakeholders, what exactly we needed from them, how would their work, how do we leverage their work into the work that we are doing, and also how do we, collaborate with them in a way. Like we identified so many community-based organizations that actually had mobilized a lot of people, but needed skills in regenerative farming. And we told them, look, do the mobilization, we'll do the training and provide the seeds to you and monitor the farmers. And then we all achieve a goal in a way. There is one that was visited by our donors, Wenzetu. It's a CBO that has mothers with children with disability. And these refugees suffer with their mothers. They were giving them medicine and training, but they were not giving them ways to produce food that would help their children grow better. And when we went to the CBO, they are very excited about the program. Now, the other interesting tool that we used definitely was the Gantt chart and the work planning. We had to make sure that we refined our work plans and be able to follow up on them. We used to have weekly meetings to discuss what is moving on, what's not working well, where can we change, where are we going below the plan, and we always kept on updating. Then the other one is not a tool per se, but it's more of the learning and reflection and planning, which we did through the learning cycles. So as part of our grant, we had to come together with other grantees to attend like monthly meetings with the rest of the grantees through a learning cycle kind of approach, where different grantees would share the experiences, challenges, and be helped by the rest of the members. And I think to us, this was another strong tool as we are planning the implementation, actually, as we're implementing the activities, because we would meet and the learning cycles were basically places for us to air out our frustrations that we had in a month to the rest of the grantees, and they would give us advice and support us and say, you know what, try to change the approach. Maybe this is not going to work. Or, yeah, we understand that might not actually work, but how about if you think about this? And so they helped us also be able to drive implementation. But of course, it was also an opportunity for us to share the experiences, the everyday experiences we are facing with the rest of the grantees that were on the calls. And so it was kind of, they were the win-win calls that we had. And of course, lastly, were the strong monitoring and evaluation. And this is something that we've kept on growing, learning, but we also identified that because we are introducing a new approach in the refugee settlement, that even many NGOs, including the government officials, they kept on questioning, how are you going to help these people grow food on the already dry soils? This is not going to work. And I remember one of the officers actually mentioned to me that, you know what, better plan on implementing a completely different activity, but not growing food, because we have tried it, it's not worked, and we don't know if it's going to work with you. And so we had to strengthen our monitoring and evaluation and making sure that, we need to prove these people wrong. For every demo site we are setting up, we had to first make sure that we capture all the pictures or the videos before we do anything. We capture during the activities and also after. And then we would bring the communities back and say, look, this is how it was before we actually started. This is where we are, and this is how it's going. And slowly, we got people believing in us. We got other organizations believing in our approach. And then we actually, in a good way, we had some of our staff members taken away because they had learned the skill and were now taken by other organizations, to implement the same, activities. So these are the tools that we used. And just to try to summarize everything, the key tools for us were the organization self-assessment, to understand who we are, what efforts what abilities do we have, where are the challenges and the weakness and the strength for us to implement this activity. Then we had to do the team planning and reflection tool, understanding the tools and also the team properly, and being able to allocate them tasks that would help us achieve the implementation goals. And then the stakeholder mapping and engagement, just to understand who are these different actors into the space where we are. How can we collaborate with them other than competing with them? Because this was key to us. We just come in a collaboration kind of sense than competing. And then also the peer learning cycles, where we would do the reflection and planning, and also sharing experiences. So the Gantt chart, the normal one for every project, and finally strengthened monitoring and evaluation, and also the ability to bring back the community to see where we've come from. I know it's one thing to do monitoring and evaluation, and then you sit with your data or share it with the donors, but also you have to be able to share it with the stakeholders themselves within the community and tell them, look, come and see this where we've come from. And sometimes we actually had the local stakeholders come and visit our work, and we would share with them the processes and experience and how we are working on everything. And of course, the last thing that we really actually did was also planning around how to, to revive, to regenerate the soil that we thought had lost it, if I'm to use that word. And because, so we had to identify a number of strategies through which we could help the farmers to regenerate their soil and be able to implement them. So those are some of the tools that we used, and they really helped us a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Noah. And what really struck me from you speaking was hearing about this spirit of collaboration. You're not alone in the work, and really thinking about who else you can collaborate with. So it's not just, singular actors, but you're stronger together. And I'd love to hear a bit about, what's it been like implementing a regenerative project? What's unique about implementing a regenerative project versus maybe more of a conventional kind of approach?
I'd like to add to that question as well. Hearing you speak now, it's always clear how embedded regenerative principles and specifically the permaculture principles are in your work. And I think when carrying out a regenerative project, it's not just within the confines of the project itself that you incorporate these principles, but also in the way that you operate as an organization. So how do the regenerative principles inform the way that you work as an organization, as YICE Uganda as well? I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on that.
Great. So, you see, one thing as YICE we've learned is that regenerative farming or permaculture is all about bringing back to life, everything that has lost the life, that is about to lose the life, whatever. And so bringing back, maintaining, and making sure that everything is as lively as possible. And as we're implementing this project, the first big challenge, which was a very good challenge we had, was the fact that the soil that we are going to work on, we are already degraded, they were washed away, and there were no green on the soil, there were no top cover room soil at all. So to us, that was the first biggest, task and challenge that we had to do. And I sat with a team. For the first time, me and my core team that had seen this before, we are very confident we are going to be successful. The new team that we had hired, they had also given up on themselves because they were within their communities, and they would use the usual would say, boss, they normally call me boss because they have a French background. Boss, this is not going to work. How are we going to make sure that these people can actually revive or regenerate this soil without having to use chemical fertilizers? And I told them it takes time. Now, that's one principle, one interesting thing that we have learned as an organization, and we also implemented in this community. With regenerative farming, with permaculture, you have to be patient. You're not going to get to see quick results on the soil, on the crops in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6, 1 year maybe. But eventually it will come, and when it comes, it is sustainable. It's not like you have applied chemicals, your crops are looking nice in this month. After you've harvested, the soil gets to be worse. So one thing we learned, we had to fight was, how do we engage the community to appreciate, to work on their mindset, and to appreciate that we are going to revive the soil, and we implement a number of strategies to build the soil again. Do the permaculture garden designs that can retain the water, work on things such as mulching, adding a lot of crops and minimum tillage, and a lot of things that we really implemented, and use organic fertilizers, organic manures that we did, which actually worked very, very well. And with time, we saw the soil regaining and the crops looking nice. For example, we could see even, the earthworms in the soil, they were not there when we were starting, and everyone started asking, oh, how come this soil is now looking strong? Even when there came like dry, a week of really hot sunshine, the crops will remain strong. And people started believing that actually this method does work. And through these demo gardens, we are able now to scale the knowledge to the rest of the farmers into the community. But while doing that, the other key principle that we identified was the ability for us to use and leverage the local knowledge or the indigenous knowledge. Remember, we are working with people from different walks of life. We had refugees from Burundi, like I mentioned, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and these came with different, farming techniques, different skills, different, a lot of things they had. And we were building on what they knew, what they had, to one, be able to guide them to improve their farming methods, but also guide so many other farmers that may not be knowing these skills. And so in some of our trainings, we'd actually ask the participants, share with us experiences on how you would control, for example, this pest. How do you bring back, the nutrients in the soil? And one thing we actually learned, I think it was a refugee from Burundi, that mentioned that the water hyphen was a very good resource of weed for improving the soil nutrient. And Nakivale is near Lake Nakivale, where the community was unhappy, was fighting against the water hyphen. And when we said, let's try it out, we tried it out and the soils started looking better. And then we are like, you see now, water hyphen is the way to go. Let us engage with the people who are managing the lake. We pick the water hyphen, put it in people's gardens and our demos. That's going to work. And so building on the local knowledge was something that was really very, very key for us. Then the other interesting bit, which I think is key that was key for the project and also an organization, is the fact around fair sharing. So when we designed all this project, at first we thought, we are going to identify a few farmers, like 50 or 100, train them, and that's that. Things started becoming big and interesting when the garden started producing and the vegetables and the food was enough. And then we started asking the people that were involved that, could you share the food with your neighbors or could you sell it? Some would actually sell, others would share with the neighbors. But at the same time, they would also share the knowledge and skills. At a point, there was a point where our money is even right now, where we don't have the money to pay for the staff to then train more new farmers. What we told the farmers that we have trained, that each of you should bring 3 neighbors, that you should recruit 3 of your neighbors that you should train into these skills and make sure that they are implementing. We'll just come and monitor your trainings. And the farmers are doing that. They are fairly sharing the knowledge and the skills, and they are scaling the work that we are doing. To us, that was something very, very strong. And of course, the other one that I think has been key is about the power of engaging the stakeholders and also understanding that in regenerative farming, it can't be a one-man. Regenerative, farming or regeneration is never a one-man show. You have to bring different efforts, different knowledge, different skills, and expertise to be able to, to deliver, to change the communities. And I think this is something that also really helped us. And lastly is about the diversity of the implementation strategies and also the activities we actually carried out that also helped us to be able to achieve, our goals for implementation. For example, when we started running the activities, in the process, we learned that farmers had now produced enough food that they could want to sell, but they didn't actually know how to get to the markets. Or if when they sold, they didn't know how to save their money. So what we did, we introduced a market, kind of a market training, where we would teach these people how to market their crop, their food, surplus food, and how to earn income, and also introduced savings into the work that we were doing, and linked them to a bank that provided them with financially trusted trainings. So you join as someone who wants to learn regenerative farming, but you end up opening up an account in the bank and you can save your money that you've earned from sale of crops. Now, that actually motivated our farmers to even work more and continue working. Up to now, it's now 2 years. We still have farmers that are producing food on a daily to go and sell to get money to save for future use. And the other thing that we also did under, thinking around diversity into activities was to introduce other different, added activities they would do alongside farming. For example, we introduced rabbit rearing and local chicken rearing. With rabbit rearing, the idea was you have enough food, the rabbits can eat on the residues of the food. When they eat on the residues of that food, they'll give you the urine, which you're going to put in the garden, and increase your soil nutrients, and as well as their droppings, they are going to increase your nutrients. But in the future, you could choose to sell a rabbit and make money. Because we always encourage them not to eat animals, of course, for health reasons. But in the future, you can sell it and make money. And it was something that everyone actually embraced. Unfortunately, the rabbit project actually never worked out well because we didn't take a lot of time. And I'm always happy to share about things that didn't work well as well. Because you people who are saying this, you should know that sometimes things be successful, sometimes not. So it didn't work out well. And then one which worked out well was the poultry, where we gave each house, like 50 households, 2 local poultry chicken. And these, they grew, they laid eggs, they got chicks. And then we are encouraging them to at least give 2 chicks to the neighbor. It's kind of, you pay it forward and you scale the impact. So these are some of the things that we learned and we think are key if we are to look into the lens of regenerative farming or regeneration. So you have to be able to, engage your stakeholders, think about the soil that you're working on, grow it, develop it, and give it time to grow. Think about the indigenous knowledge is key because the indigenous knowledge is what we're actually building on. When people in the community share their experiences and you implement them, they are going to love you. They are going to say, he listens to us. They listen to what we are doing. But these are skills which the coming generation should also learn and ambulance. And if we don't tap it, pick it, use it now, then they won't find it there. And of course, the other thing that we looked at was having to think around diversity. Wide range of activities, wide range of crops, wide range of approaches. What else can you add in order to create this household or this regeneration holistic? Yeah, and so basically that's how we looked at it.
Noah, thank you so much for joining and for sharing your experience. And it's actually really good to hear about how you adapted to the things that maybe didn't go to plan. I love the story of the water hyacinth, and it reminds me of, this permaculture principle of the problem is the solution. How do we learn from what appears to be problematic and, make changes and adapt with our program. So Noah, thank you so much for sharing, and it's great to have you here.
All right, great. Thank you so much, James and Jackie.
What really struck me about when Noah was speaking was how that they embedded this kind of almost different way of approaching the work and different way of seeing the world, almost of, kind of approaching it from an abundance mentality. I think, not seeing the kind of scarcity of there not being any other people working in this area, but approaching from collaboration rather than from scarcity.
I completely agree. I think that's super important in the kind of sectors and contexts that us and our members are working in as well. Because anytime there's, an NGO that's trying to fill a gap, like these organizations arise from a need. And so it's really easy to be bogged down by seeing the lack. And when you're driven to try and fulfill what you see as a really important problem, it's easy for that to really influence organizations, leading to, stressful situations, burnout. You're always, kind of chasing after something. But taking more of a regenerative kind of mindset, worldview, I think it's easier to reframe some of this thinking, as you said, and look at abundance and think about possibilities, like, the visioning stage that we've already covered in this series, thinking about what could abundance look like for all? How can we reach this? How can we work collaboratively, as Noah said? And I think there's so many ways, if you just kind of start from this point of reframing and kind of questioning some of the really common kind of attitudes in, when you're working in contexts like disaster and displacement and development that we're working with, I think just taking that time and thinking about how can we reframe these thoughts at the level of our implementation and in our specific activities. So I think that's something that we wanted to talk a bit more about in the session.
Exactly, because this is actually how nature works when you think about it. And regenerative design and permaculture design and all these kind of interconnected fields and methodologies are all about being inspired by living systems and how nature creates for abundance, like you're talking about, Jackie. And so we actually have an activity for everyone who's listening where we have the principles of permaculture and with some kind of reflection tools for you and your team. So thinking about how you might reflect on these as you implement your project and as you kind of work as a team and as your organization to really embed these principles not only in the project itself, but like we were talking about, in the way that you work, in the process itself. Regenerative work is often very focused on the process as well as the outcomes.
Exactly. And I think, again, we can think about these prompts and these questions through various scales. So we can learn from kind of ecological living systems and apply those principles to our more kind of social living systems. And not just kind of, again, the impacts of a project, but maybe within the organization and then maybe even within yourself as you work. Maybe there's an opportunity to, for example, incorporate feedback more often or to diversify the perspectives that you're exposing yourself to. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of room to learn from what our members are already doing through this activity.
Yeah, so I really hope that this activity is useful to you. Feel free to use it with your organization, your colleagues, and share if you like.
And alongside that, we've also mentioned the importance of structuring your vision, especially when it comes to implementation, when unexpected challenges can arise. And Noah mentioned a tool that's really useful for YICE Uganda is a Gantt chart. So a challenge for you while you're doing the kind of thinking exercise, applying the permaculture principles to your work and thinking of ways that you can incorporate this thinking into each maybe activity or each stage, into the real fabric of your work. I challenge you to come up with, it'll be different for everyone, but a range of activities, kind of more tangible manifestations of how you can incorporate these principles that maybe feel a little bit more theoretical into your day-to-day work. And maybe you can combine that with the Gantt chart and make this something that is really systematically part of the way you operate.
Exactly. So kind of bringing this into action as you go. Yeah. So it's been such a pleasure to be here with you all again. Thank you so much for joining, and please feel free to share these resources with your colleagues and more widely if you like. And of course, if you aren't a member of Realliance already, you're very welcome to join. And how do people do that?
If you just visit realliance.org/join, you can find out more about what it means to be a member and share some of your details, get in touch with us. Or just email contact@realliance.org with any questions. We'd love to hear about your work. Think about ways you can engage with the network or potentially collaborate. So don't be shy, feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing from you, and thank you so much for joining this session. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.